This episode of Cult House is brought to you by Indie Comics CreatorCon. Featuring over 150 comic book creators, 15 publishers, and 10 panels, Indie Comics CreatorCon takes place Saturday, March 15th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at Southern Connecticut State University in New Haven, Connecticut. Among the guests announced so far are Heather Antos, Jim Lawson, and Mike Martz. Tickets are $8 regular or $5 if you're a student or military attendee. To get yours, visit the referral link in this episode's description or go to www.indiecomicscreatorcon.com/ref/culthouse.
The sky's not blue.
Welcome back to the Cult House Podcast. I'm your host, the Scholar of Spite and the Saturday Night Delight, Roger Riddell. Joining me today, he is the guitarist for Cemetery Skyline, Insomnium, Omnium Gatherum, and I Am the Night. Joining me all the way from Finland, Markus Vanhala. How are you doing today, Markus?
Hello. All the way from Finland now, but yesterday I was still in China, so or 2 days before, because I just got back home and had like 30 plus hours traveling from Nanjing, China. We just ended Omnium Gatherum Asian tour, and it was just a really long travel back home. So I'm a bit flying high here at the moment with jet lag, but excuse me if I'm a little bit slow at the moment.
Being in so many bands, like you're probably like on the run constantly, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I still have a home. It's here. It's been pretty wild. Again, like before the COVID times, it was almost like 200 shows per year or something with Insomnium and Omnium Gatherum, and then hit the pandemic, and I was 2 years at home, and unfortunately formed 2 new bands, which doesn't help these schedules at all nowadays, again, when everything is back to normal and busy.
Yeah, I mean, you had to also have been going a little bit stir crazy during that pandemic time, though, with just that sudden stop of being on the run like that. So it's got to be nice to be back to that grind, right?
Yeah, definitely. I made way too much music during the pandemic times with 4 bands, and I think I did something like 4 full-length albums and 2 or 3 EPs, and so it's really nice to just to be on the road and play this music for the people the past 2 years. So I've been really happy to be busy on live field now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know next week you've got the debut album coming out for Cemetery Skyline, which features Mikael from Dark Tranquility, Santeri from Amorphis, Vesa from Sentenced, and Victor from Dimmu Borgir. How did you all come together to form that band?
This is pretty much like the gathering of friends. Like label wants to call this a super group, and I kind of hate that word. It sucks, but I call it this more like a friends doing music together, the kind of music that we grew up listening back in the 90s. Like we were metalheads, but everyone was secretly liking goth music, and even not that secretly, like everyone loved publicly Type O Negative and Sisters of Mercy, but we are playing death metal and different groups, but that's always been around, so called. And then just at some point, this first spark of this band happened just before the pandemic in the 70,000 Tons of Metal. We were just in the bar, like always, just forming new bands. It always happens when there's like colleagues sitting in the bar drinking beer, but with this band we actually did an album, and so out of million bar bands that have been formed drunk, this one came true.
Yeah, and I've had a chance to listen to the album, and I've really been into it. Like I know that you've gotten some good reviews out of it so far ahead of the release, and um, how how much of I guess sort of a shift in thinking as far as songwriting is it when you're going from like the bands that like all of you guys typically play in to doing something that's a little bit that's goth rock but is also has that more accessible kind of sound to it.
Yeah, this was really welcomed, at least for me, like do this kind of music because, well, I already play these melodic death metal bands and black metal bands, so it wouldn't make any sense to form a new band which would be like melodic death metal because I already have those. So this was something completely different, and that was the point also in this band, like that everyone is doing that kind of music that we haven't done yet and we are liking. And so it was a new challenge, and it was great to check, can we do this kind of stuff? And it's a learning process, and we took our time for like a it took 4 years to complete this album. So because there was no outside pressures, there was no label, nobody knew is the band didn't exactly even exist for the people. We just really few of our closest friends knew that we are working with this stuff, and so we didn't have deadlines. So that's why it took so long. But I think it was a good thing that we gave all the time in the world that we could for this album because it turned out to be quite a good one, I would say.
Yeah.
And there was a risk, of course, like a death metal guys starting to do more pop metal or goth metal or kind of poppier side. So this was a learning process, but I really love to work on this album, and it definitely won't be our last album.
Yeah, yeah, no, like I was saying, I've listened to it a few times now and I've really been into it, and it's not like as poppy of like goth rock as like him would be, but it's kind of got like that Sisters of Mercy meets like Typo Negative kind of feel to it.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're why we started this band. We were trying to be a tribute band for Typo Negative and Sisters of Mercy, but it became something different. So, but of course, those ingredients are there definitely, and you can easily spot that we've been listening to those bands, and we don't even try to hide that thing because it's so obvious.
Yeah. Do you find that in Europe, like maybe there's a little bit more openness to experimenting musically? Because like I feel like in the US, for example, like you'll have someone from like one band announce a side project, but that side project sounds almost exactly like their original band. It's like you couldn't do this in the other band.
I, I don't, I don't honestly know about that. Like my comparison with the Europe and US touring wise have always been like I've been touring with weird bands in the US, like it was Insomnium with Epica and Omnium Gatherum with Sonata Arctica. Those tracks would never work in Europe because in touring wise, Europe is more like a conservative that you cannot do that kind of mash up, mix up between metal genres on tour. But maybe that side project thing might be true that you said, like
Yeah, you
cultural
got a
difference.
good point on the touring thing because I think on the touring, we probably are a little bit more open on different genres of bands being on the same bill. But I think like at least in the circle of people that I've, kind of been around since I was like a teenager, sometimes there's a little bit of hesitance if say like Kerry King from Slayer, decided he was suddenly just gonna do like a album of power ballads, there might be a little bit more hesitancy to embrace it.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
I've always been like a multi-band guy. So I pretty much like all the time been playing more than one band, and in in my side, it's always been helping each other bands because I don't have to experiment too much. like some bands did these huge experiments back in the past, which kind of destroyed the band or didn't destroy the band. What depends on the band, but like I've always been like getting bored to play in one band because I want to do different kind of stuff, and it's better to do different kind of stuff with their different band than to mix like to Omnium Gatherum sounds mix like true black metal and gothic metal. Then it might get weird,
Yeah.
or it might be the best ever. I don't know, but these have been my style to do these kind of adventures in music.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some bands can pull off that experimentation from time to time, but definitely agree that there's a lot of bands that have tried to mix up their sound and hasn't always worked.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me about the writing process for Nordic Gothic. I know that you all started working on it about 4 years ago. So is that just kind of like you all formed the idea for it on the cruise and then the pandemic happened and suddenly you had this time to mess around with this idea?
Yeah, exactly so. And Santeri was pretty much the first one we started to throw some ideas of the music, and we quite quickly became a really good music writing duo, which is great because in Omnium Gatherum and Insomnium, I usually write my own stunts pretty much like from start to finish the song. And but with Santeri, we definitely share some weirds a lot and bouncing the ideas and kind of like refreshed each other's ideas. So this was really fresh kind of way of making music for me. And then we just made songs. We didn't exactly have a big plan that we are gonna conquer the world and make album and get a record deal immediately. We just wrote music honestly, like just for the sake of writing music with friends and like this is cool, this works, and yeah, let's do this. And Mikael said like he actually learned singing during this process, and he was thanking me and Santeri that thank you that we took 4 years on completing this album, because on the past 2 years I've been learning sing cleans, which is not of course exactly true because he sang cleans on the Projector album 25 years ago, but still getting better and better, and taking the time is a good thing for them. And it's not always possible with your like main bands because there's always deadlines pushing for the labels and managers and whatnot. Basic bullshit of life in
Yeah.
every field. It doesn't matter what you are doing for your job, but it's always like deadlines coming here and there and annoying. But yeah, with this band, it was just easy, honest, making music without pressures, and this is what it came out. And let's see what the second album will be. A lot of pressures, deadlines, everything, and all the bullshit toppings. Might not, because we want to keep this band nice and fresh and stress free.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
think it
that's
definitely comes across in the album that, everything sounds, you can tell in the sound of the album that you guys were having fun making it, you know what I mean?
yeah, that was the point. Doing things a bit differently than on our mother bands. Like for example, first we didn't talk about at all that are we doing album or are we not doing album. And then when we had like enough of demos, we sent demos to 5 labels, and every one of those 5 labels wanted to sign us. And then we were like, okay, we are a real band, so we're going to do the album. And then we didn't exactly speak at all. Are we a live band? Probably we were thinking that we are not going to play live at all. And then one of my really good friends from John Smith Festival promoter in Finland, he insisted that you have to play your first show in my festival. And we were like, all right, let's do it. And we actually did it already last July. So we played a show before the album is out, and it was a pretty big ass show. Exactly, we played after Behemoth. I was seeing you have a Behemoth shirt there. So Testament and Behemoth were playing before us, and we even had like a signing session before our first show, and it was pretty full of people. So things have been going quite funny way in this band, and And actually, next Wednesday we are having it's in secrecy yet, but I think it's gonna be announced today that we are having like a album release party and pre-listening session at Duff's in New York. I'm gonna fly to New York next Sunday just for this party on because it's a typo negative bar, and it's a classic metal bar. So we are kind of like launching the album campaign in Duff's, and that's the way to do things in this band. Just having fun, something different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's good timing too, because this will probably go out next Wednesday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Then we can just people coming out, come to the Duff's in the evening, drink beer and listen to some goth music.
What do you think there is about like the Nordic culture that lends itself to this kind of music?
Uh, well, that's always the question being asked as a Finnish, because Finnish bands are melancholic. That's the typical word. And it's exactly true. And it's not any posing at all. And you always get different kind of answers to whatever metal guy you are asking. It's the Finnish winter or long dark autumn or something. But I would say it's more like a program to our musical DNA, because the Finnish Christmas songs are really miserable. Finnish, what is the word? Religious songs, they are really miserable. Finnish, even some children's songs are really miserable. And back in the day, when we were in the first grades of the school, we always had to listen to these really miserable Christmas songs and every morning, and they are always pretty much played in a minor key, and the stories are sad. Even those songs should be like funny and happy and uplifting, but most of the Finnish songs are not. So that kind of that way we probably have learned this kind of melancholic music side, that music have to be played in minor key and being melancholic more than uplifting. So at least that's my perception of this outcome.
Yeah. Of all of those melancholic songs, are there any that just kind of like stick out in your head whenever you think about them? Like what would that song have been about?
I sorry, like
Oh, so like of all of those like melancholic like songs that you're talking about, like the Finnish children have to listen to, like are there any that still stick out in your head after all these years? And like what would that one have been about?
my really, what is the Finnish Christmas song? I think it's called Tonttu, which is gnome in English, and it's something like life is short and mostly it's sad. That's like that's that's what she's singing on the Finnish Christmas songs. Life is short and it's mostly sad. So you have to go with your Christmas spirit with that sentence. How are you doing it?
Yeah, it's like
Probably that's why we have a Santa Claus in Finland. So after those miserable Christmas songs and Christmas waiting, there have to be something good coming, and then it's this weird guy with a big beard, and which is in fact really scary for young kids. So it's weird stuff. Honestly, I don't know. We
yeah.
are living in a weird country.
Yeah, it's a funny juxtaposition to like I think I've read before that like Finland actually has like close to the North Pole like an actual like Santa's village kind of thing going on.
Yeah, I've actually even been there.
Oh.
We were once playing in Rovaniemi. That's in the Arctic Circle, where the Arctic Circle starts, and there's a Santa Claus land. Yeah, we
Yeah.
have Santa Claus land and Moomin land in Finland.
And hopefully the the Santa Claus land is a little bit happier than the songs though. I've got like the impression now that you go there and the elves try to kidnap you.
Yeah, yeah. It was really touristy, so it was quite positive place in a way. if you like touristy things. If there would be evil Santa Claus, then there wouldn't be tourists. All the Japanese tourists would be scared and run away. It's actually always full of Japanese people with cameras, but
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah, no, my funny thing, since you mentioned um Japanese in relation to Christmas, is that there's actually this whole thing in Japan where they um basically, from what I've read, look at like Colonel Sanders from KFC as like their Father Christmas. And like everyone there reserves like KFC meals. There's like a whole thing a few years ago about it where there were several like publications that put out articles on this. And like ever since then, I've just kind of been like, how much of that is just really good marketing by KFC and how much of it is just really weird like cultural things that make sense there, but like don't, like they just sound funny everywhere else.
That's weird stuff. I've
Yeah.
never seen KFC Santa Claus. But exactly in Finland, like for the US culture, I don't know if you have probably you have in the US the same, but Christmas is full of Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
It's like there's like a Coca-Cola Christmas trucks and Coca-Cola Santa Claus and stuff like that. And that's almost as weird as the KFC.
Yeah, they used to advertise like Coca-Cola Santa packs every year where like they would have a different Santa Claus design each year on the soda cans for Coca-Cola.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the biggest capitalists in the world, Coca-Cola, and Christmas is the biggest capital event of the year. So good thinking, boys and girls. So Coca-Cola makes Christmas.
Yeah. So one other thing that I've heard about you is that you're like a big car guy. What are some of your favorite cars?
Uh, I have three General Motors cars in my yard there. I have an 88 Corvette and 87 Monte Carlo SS, which is actually Alexi Laiho's old car, and it's highly pimped and turbocharged at the moment because I've been building it to perfection, and it's just insane, funny car, loudest car I've heard. And then my daily driver is a GMC Yukon XL, the huge truck. So that's pretty much my jam at home. But in my to-do list in life is like a 68 or 70 Charger or some Dodge Mopar from that era, 68, 69, 70, like
Yeah.
Dodge Charger or Coronet Super B or Roadrunner. But they are getting insanely expensive. So hopefully people will buy Cemetery Skyline album a lot.
Yeah, no, that 68 era Charger is like one of the like classic muscle car bodies. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the badass car on the movies. Like always the bad guys in the movies. In the Bullet, there was a Charger was the bad guy, and Vanishing Point, I think the Charger was the bad guy car, and then of course Dukes of Hazzard. They are good ones, but they have a Charger, but that's not Black Charger. That's the General Lee, the
Yeah.
orange one. Um, but that old Charger is definitely like a movie and TV car, and that made the prices sky high nowadays. It used to be when it came out like a pretty much cheap car and like cheap Mopar, and not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I feel like there's like the three like top iconic muscle car bodies, and it's like the Charger, the Mustang, and the Corvette.
Yeah, and one of my favorites on top of those is Plymouth Cuda
Yeah.
from the 70 or 74 Plymouth Cudas. They are really really cool cars, but they have also skyrocketed with prices. It's like not doable anymore to find those any reasonable price, or then you cannot find even like wrecks anywhere because they've just been stolen to some capitalist garages.
Yeah, and then just like, it's there's like kind of the whole thing too now of how much of it is still the car that it was originally was versus like is it basically a whole new car just with the body on it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Probably
Yeah.
they've been changing the new Hemi engines to most of those.
Yeah, it's like the old myth about the ship. I forget what ship it was. It was ship of Theseus, I think, where it's just like they kept like replacing it over and over again. So to the point that like the ship of Theseus, is it still the ship of Theseus because it's not the ship that it originally was because all of the wood was replaced as it was rotting.
Yeah, yeah. Indeed.
Like
That's
philosophical stuff.
yeah. And that's pretty much what have been happening to my Monte Carlo. It's been pretty much replaced all the stuff in the engine already, and it's been highly pimped and turbocharged.
Yeah.
It looks like the same, so it's kind of like a
Yeah.
sleeper car. Doesn't look so aggressive, but it's really aggressive.
I mean, that's always the fun ones, I think, though, where you're surprised later on. Like it's kind of like the whole like principle of the Millennium Falcon in Star Wars, where it doesn't look impressive, but it's like the best ship in the galaxy.
Yeah, indeed. That's a good comparison.
So between like the Nordic countries, I feel like each one of them's kind of known for a different genre of metal specifically, because like Norway, obviously there's like the black metal. Sweden's got melodic death metal. Finland, I feel kind of gets known for a lot of symphonic kind of metal and then also for goth rock. But like how do you feel like those three different um sounds, I guess, sort of because of the proximity of the countries to each other and because the musicians from each of the countries have always just kind of intermingled as a result of that, like how do you feel that those different influences have sort of like merged over the years?
Well, I think, yeah, Norway definitely was black metal country, and Sweden is more like this Gothenburg, and used to be entombed sound, and maybe Finland was getting mostly known by kind of like a power metalist musicianship that the like
Yeah.
the especially guitar work in Finnish bands have been quite in a high level, like with bands like Children of Bodom and Stratovarius in the start, and then all the others after that. And another route in Finnish music was like this gothic thing, like with him and sentenced, more melancholic rock and 69 Eyes and this kind of stuff. And then the third branch of the Finnish metal musical tree is like this folk metal, which is not exactly my cup of tea, but at some point, like so many folk metal bands coming out of Finland, like Korpiklaani, Turisa, Sensiferum, and these, and so these three sides were pretty much the sides of Finnish metal.
Yeah. I was um just trying to think a minute ago when I was, going through that question, like I got to Finland, I was like, the first band that always comes to mind, like metal wise for me, is Children of Bodom because of just how big they got. And I was like, wait,
Yeah.
how do I describe what Children of Bodom was?
It's weird. It's melodic death metal, bit early power metal stuff in their first albums, and then it became more like a American Americanized metal a bit.
Yeah. I love that like out of all three of those countries though, like the metal bands from the Nordic area could add things like keyboards and synth to metal, but it still sounded really heavy.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much always been present in all these three countries, the keyboards in metal. And in the old school days, there was a saying that keyboards doesn't belong to metal. So At least these Nordic countries changed that.
Yeah.
I remember like a US band, Nocturnus. They were probably the first band in definitely using keyboards. And it was really weird sounding stuff back in the time, like 92 or 30 years ago.
Yeah. Do you think maybe that works better there because like so many people in that region of the world tend to have some degree of like classical training in their instruments, so there's maybe a little bit more acceptance of it?
Yeah, I think really many people in Finland and Sweden and probably Norway too are getting like at really tender young age are being put to piano lessons. For example, my parents put me to piano lessons when I was 5, and I tried to play piano for years, but it never was my cup of tea. So then I had few years of doing nothing in music, and then I find guitar. And nowadays I'm composing a lot of stuff with piano. So in the end, the circle was completed, and it gets me longing like why back then when I was a kid, why I didn't learn more piano.
Yeah.
I should have. Same thing with like in the school with Swedish language, because Sweden is the second official language of Finland. So we are forced to learn Swedish in early tender age at school because it's mandatory in Finnish school, and pretty much everyone hates it during Finnish kids. So I never learned Swedish well, and pretty much when I started touring, I'm always touring with Swedish bands, and now I'm even playing in a band with 2 Swedish people. Now it gets me also like why I never learned Swedish properly. Do your lessons well.
Is there
Don't
any
be like
sort of
me.
like competition between like Norway and Sweden and Finland on like a cultural level?
Of course, there's always like that, but Sweden always wins. It's insane, like how big level of musicianship and music Sweden always have got with all the ABBA and Roxette and everything coming after that. Like I just watched the metal documentary from Swedish metal and rock. It was called Hard Rock på Export. Michael Stanne sent me that link, and it was 4 years of 4 hours of pure glory and just like successful stories of every band. And there were so many bands of different metal genres, and everyone was successful. So we were just like, we poor Finns, we just lost the game.
Yeah.
And of course it's a friendly rivalry. Like always when you met Swedes and Norwegians outside our countries, it's a pure love and feeling of unity. But when it comes to ice hockey, then we are enemies, especially Finland and Sweden. That's the real war.
Yeah, no, one thing that I've always heard is like if you go to Norway, for example, never say that Sweden's better at winter sports.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Norwegians can ski, or they have found the perfect rock for skiing that nobody can spot what it is, but it's been like always. Finland used to have the best ski jumpers, but not anymore. We had the craziest guys that were ski jumping like when they were drunk and winning Olympic golds and stuff like that. But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know you mentioned ice hockey, and I definitely noticed over the years of watching NHL over here that there are a lot of people with Swedish and Finnish names on the hockey teams.
yeah, yeah, so many NHL players coming from Finland and Sweden.
Yeah.
That is our national sports, like that everyone loves in our countries.
Yeah. So yeah, back to Cemetery Skyline. What plans do you all have for tours coming up?
Well, tours might be too glorious to think because all the bands involved in this band, so the schedules are insane and a lot of stuff came through. But we actually have some festivals coming next year. We have a Finnish tour, which tour says 4 dates. And then we have some festivals lined up and something like we try to do a little, but we cannot do any longer tours, at least not yet, because nobody knows what the future holds, but at the moment it's just too difficult to get the schedules right. And then we don't want to have like 3 fill-in members and 2 original members of the bands on tour. So
Yeah, what happens if y'all have like a festival where um like all of your bands are booked on the festival in some way or another?
well, then we just play.
Yeah.
I'm used to do these 2 shows per night, even on tours, so I'm okay with that.
I've just always kind of wondered about that with like people in different bands, like the whole process of, preparing for multiple shows in one night.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't I don't like it, but I can do it. It's doable. Let's say it like that. I
Yeah.
once had like we are playing a festival in Finland with both Insomnium and Omnium Gatherum, and when the I don't remember, maybe it was Insomnium intro was playing, and then my bandmate said like, "Hey, you are having OG shirt on." I was like, "Oh fuck!" But usually I quote the bands like in Insomnium I play like more black guitars, and in Omnium white guitars. And in Omnium I wear white shoes, and in Insomnium black, so I kind of know what's happening with the colors.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like it's a good trick for making sure that, you stay in the right mindset for each band.
Yeah, whether it has to be something like on the show I was wearing like a long leather jacket, so I know now it's Cemetery Skyline show happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the album is coming next week out, so we'll see where it goes. We are living interesting times at the moment. That the thing that should not be will be unleashed.
Yeah, and are you hitting any other US cities after Duff's, or is it just like that one stop for the release?
And that's just like a Duff's party and nothing else. Just a
Oh, okay.
pre-listening session. And for the US, we are playing Prog Power next year. That's the only US show we have lined up at the moment.
Yeah, I've always heard good things about that festival, but I've never had a chance to go. When I was a kid in high school, the guy who owned the local record store that I would go to used to go to that every year, and he would always come back with all these stories about the bands that he saw. It always kind of expanded my horizons on like new things to check out. I think that was actually how I checked out like Amorphis for the first time, for example.
Yeah, I think that's the way how Prog Power wants to do their stuff, like getting more special bands on the bill, because we we are not prog or we are not power either, but that's more like a bands you don't see that often anyhow, like playing on that festival. I think Night Flight Orchestra is playing on the same festivals. I don't think they have played too much US either yet, and
Yeah.
bands like that.
Yeah. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of a fine line on like proggy type of stuff with goth bands, because like Typo, for example, had some stuff that kind of leans more into being progressive too, with just like the overall length of it and the um just kind of the way that the song evolves. Like Christian Woman sounds like 3 different songs at different points.
Yeah, exactly. It owes a lot to some Pink Floyd, this kind of thing, that the songs are not the usual structure.
Yeah. And
I'm
that's
always saying like a Typo Negative is a perfect combination of Beatles and Black Sabbath
yeah.
and goth.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say too, like one of my favorite things in a band is when they are able to um keep you guessing on a song. Like my favorite Black Sabbath album is Sabotage, and that album has so many songs that progress from one style to another and then back again over the course of, just like 6 or 7 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. It's musical adventures of the 70s.
Yeah.
Might have something. infused with some other substances, but they made a good out of it.
Yeah, I mean,
Even
it's
the band picture in Sabotage tells something about maybe there was some powders involved.
yeah, I think I know for sure that like volume 4 is the one where they spent adjusted for inflation like 275 grand on cocaine while they were recording that album. And I think 75 or 76 is the year that Ozzy has said before that he basically dropped acid every day for a year just to see what would happen. And I think now we get to see what happens. So
Yeah, good tests. At least some good songs happened.
yeah. Well, yeah, I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know it's probably pretty late over there in Finland. So uh I'll go ahead and let you go. Cemetery
I'm on.
Skyline's new album, Nordic Gothic, comes out October 11th next week. Marcus, is there anything you want to close with?
Let's see at Duff's. All the New Yorker people listening this at next Wednesday. Is it 9th? 2 days before the release, so nothing much else.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
More of you.